Greetings and blessings in Jesus' name. This is the Mission 1521 update for the month of June. Well, let me just start by saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is so late. When I arrived back in Medford from Africa, from Nigeria, in the next 5 days after my arrival, we put on a Great Commission Sunday here at Calvary Chapel, Medford. Was quite involved, and also was able to close on a house for our family. So we're really excited that we've got a place to kind of nest a little bit here as we're putting down roots again in Oregon, in Southern Oregon, in Medford specifically. So we got that underway and then began to fix up the place. It needed paint and was a bunch of fix-em-up jobs. Well, you don't want to hear my excuses, but I'm just thanking the Lord that He's provided us with a home. But it has been a little busy, to say the least. So thank you for your patience with me. But let me just say the trip to Nigeria was absolutely wonderful. The Lord really, really blessed that trip over to connect with Pastor JB. We spent many days in front of a computer, training him on new equipment, new software for the recordings of his radio teachings. He's doing great with that. New capabilities for him to record video as well as the multiplication of some of the resources that we use there in Nigeria, like the little micro SD cards that we hand out, not quite like candy, but we hand out frequently, with now over 1,000 resources, pushing 1,200 resources on each of those little memory cards. Well, let me also say that my time with Pastor Jibber had a very spiritual side to it as well, as we would gather morning after morning to just open our hearts before the Lord, to share, to pray, to open the scriptures, to just make sure we were on track with the Lord and the work He's doing amongst the Fulani there, at least our involvement with the work of the Fulani. Now, do let me say that in this last trip, my eyes were opened even more so to the amazing things God is doing amongst the Fulani tribe in Nigeria. There's a handful of missionaries and many other Nigerians that all have their roles to play in reaching a people group, an unreached people group of at least 15 million. And wherever people, wherever evangelists, wherever missionaries are applying some basic biblical principles about speaking the word in love and in truth, exalting Jesus, and giving them an opportunity to know Him personally, primarily by reading the Gospels, getting familiar with Him, hearing messages about Him, or watching videos like the Jesus film. People fall in love with Jesus, the world around, when He is lifted up. And that is happening. What was once a few hundred believers back in like the 80s, early 90s, has turned into thousands. The thousands now in these days into the tens of thousands of Fulani believers scattered all around the country in different fellowship groups or individual believers within families, family units that have come to Christ together, that will listen and have their services as they hear like Pastor Jibber's teachings on the radio, or they'll get out one of those MVP players, little solar-powered players that has the same content as the memory cards, or they'll get out their cell phones and listen to a message or two or three, along with their family, taking time to pray and to even break bread together. So the Lord is at work, and the growth is beginning to really pick up. God is at work, and there are numerous accounts of Fulani coming to Christ, evangelists, sometimes even suffering significantly, in some cases even giving their lives for the sake of making Jesus known amongst the Fulani. I want to tell you one story, one that I think is significant right now. It goes along with a verse that I want to read. And in the recent sermon or message that I gave at Calvary Chapel for the Great Commission Sunday, I spent quite a bit of time in John chapter 4. And one of the verses there that we're familiar with, but as so often is the case, we're familiar with a part of a verse or a specific verse and not necessarily the full context. Listen to this out of John chapter 4 before I share my story. It's in verse 34 where Jesus says to his disciples when they come back from the Samaritan village, and they're surprised that he's there talking with this Samaritan woman. It's a cross-cultural evangelistic exchange that's taking place. And this woman is beginning to believe in Jesus. Well, he responds to them after they ask him, has anyone brought you anything to eat? Jesus says, my meat is to do the will of he that sent me. We stop there so often, and that is amazingly true, how deeply satisfying it is to do the will of the Lord. But he puts an and on that phrase. He says, and to finish his work. So Jesus was about the work of his Father. He was exalting himself in front of the Samaritan woman, leading her towards faith in him. And as we'll see, the entire village of the Samaritans. It was a cross-cultural ministry to a despised people. And Jesus says, my meat, my deep satisfaction is to do the will of the Lord in finishing the work he's given me to do, which he exemplifies by the next verse. He says, say ye not, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, like now, for they are already white unto harvest. Now he's making a reference to the Samaritans. Look, right now the Samaritans are ripe. They're despised by the Jews, ignored by everyone else, and yet they were ready. And in the course of the ministry that Jesus would do there for the next couple days after being invited to stay, it will be said that many of the Samaritans believed, not just for the saying of the woman, but many believed because of Jesus' words. An amazing story. And I hope you'll listen to the sermon that I shared on that, which will be linked along with this video in our monthly email update. I hope you'll go into depth about this amazing story and some of the connections we have to our day and our own work, the work of the Lord in finishing the task of making sure everyone has an opportunity to know and love Jesus. Well, now the story that I want to share, I'm going to say the name of the individual, obviously changed for security purposes. We'll call him Al-Haji. Al-Haji was a seller of used American clothing. He was Muslim. He was from a tribe in the north of Nigeria, the Hausa tribe, but he was selling his clothes in the town of Jos in central Nigeria? Well, he meets a woman that recognizes that he is needy spiritually. She invites him to speak with her pastor, and Alhaji goes, frustrated with Islam, frustrated with his life, and he hears a clear presentation, the gospel of Jesus Christ. He surrenders his heart to the Lord, and Alhaji begins to get on fire for Jesus. He's far from his home village. He's far from his wife and his father and mother. But he has other relatives down in the city of Jos. And he begins to share what he is learning in discipleship from the pastor. The Muslim relatives are obviously concerned, from their perspective anyway. And they eventually take him to see a local king that's supposedly going to chastise him for his conversion to Christianity. For 3 days, he's deprived of food and water, and he's told that he must renounce Jesus. He couldn't imagine at this point renouncing his faith in Christ. And he eventually escapes and gets back to that discipleship with the pastor, although in a short period of time, he becomes very discontent in the sense that he wants to share his newfound faith with his parents and with his wife. He journeys up to the region of Kano, which is a big Muslim center in the north of Nigeria where Sharia law is practiced. And he begins to share his faith. His mother is dying. She is led to the Lord. His father also accepts the Lord. His wife also accepts the Lord. And he even begins to reach out to some of the young people and children in that completely Muslim region of Nigeria. Well, his neighbors and other family members are concerned again with this new faith. They take him on to speak with a higher level Muslim leader, a sultan there in that region. Now, this next time that his faith is scrutinized, they use another scare tactic of putting a noose around his neck and demanding that he deny the Lord. When he doesn't, they don't end up hanging him. He is eventually released after some torture, after some interrogation, hoping that will be enough to defer him away from sharing his faith. But of course, Alhaji can't keep it in. So he continues to share his faith, stirring up more trouble in his village there near Kano. His house is burnt down at one point, and he's living off in a little side hut there with his father and his wife. Eventually, his wife is taken from him. The family members come to get her because of his influence upon her for Christ. He is later taken before an emir, and each successive level of scrutiny, of judgment, brings harsher and harsher consequences. This time, the emir, hearing that he will not deny his faith, orders that a military helicopter be utilized to take this man out into the desert and be left for dead. He's beaten, he's left there in the desert near the Lake Chad area, which is in the northeast corner of Nigeria, and that's where he is left. Now, no chance of walking to civilization, no water, no food. And after 3 days, Alhaji is near death. And some Fulani cattle herders come by and see him there. And what we get after that is essentially a replay of the Good Samaritan story we have in the scriptures. The Fulani men scoop him up and carry him off to their little makeshift village. They have temporary villages where they're grazing their cattle. They begin to feed him their food, milk, their herbs that they use for medicinal purposes. And over the course of 3 months, they take Al-Haji from the point of death back to some degree of health. Now, Al-Haji, knowing him from the earlier part of the story, he can't keep quiet about Jesus. And he's telling these Muslim Fulani cattle herders about the Lord. And little by little, these Fulani cattle herders also fall in love with Jesus and begin to follow Jesus. The leader of them, Yaqub, he becomes a strong believer. He begins to lead the group. And when it's time for Al-Haji to go back to his village, they're supportive of him. In fact, knowing that his house has been burnt down, they sell some cattle, raise some money, and give him some resources to rebuild his house. Well, the reason I know this story, and Pastor JB knows this story, is because we were getting ready to speak at a rather large African congregation to encourage them to keep praying for the Fulani and to reach out to them at any opportunity, letting them know of resources that we had. And we were giving away micro SD cards with all of our resources to anyone that had contact with Fulani. But 30 minutes before this service, we were sharing some of our work with a pastor that Pastor JB knows, a reverend really, a regional leader for his denomination. And he told us this story about Al-Haji. And this pastor had kept up with Al-Haji. And he was giving us the latest about the rebuilding of his home. And we offered not only, that Jibber might eventually go and visit this group of Fulani believers that needs discipleship and provide resources for their growth, but also to help with the rebuilding of Al-Haji's house, giving some resources for the roof thereof. Well, it was this same reverend that allowed us to speak at his large congregation, giving us this information that would continue to put Pastor JB in contact with both Al-Haji and Yakubu. And arrangements were eventually made to go and visit. Until last week, this has all been progressing over several weeks. Al-Haji had continued to share his faith. The Fulani group continued to grow in their faith. But we just got news last week that Al-Haji once again has been captured. And he is, even as we speak, being held against his will and tortured. And we're waiting to hear the results of that. We're obviously praying for him and invite you to pray with us that the Lord's will would be done, of course. We would hope that he would be released. We would hope that he would continue to have a ministry and be able to even link Pastor Jibber with the group up there in the Northeast, which is, by the way, prime Boko Haram territory. Pastor JB is anxious to get up there, and yet his link right now is captive. So please be praying for Pastor JB, for Al-Haji, and the ongoing work with that particular group of Fulani believers. There's other Fulani believers that we're working with in the south, down in Taraba State, near the capital. Also, actually a couple groups in Taraba State. Wherever we're getting a response. Actually in Adamawa State, multiple groups of believers that is visiting to help disciple and raise up leaders and encourage leaders with resources as well as new believers. So we thank the Lord that all these years of sowing are beginning to reap a harvest. Well, I'll leave some of the other details like some prayer and praise for the email update. Just continue to lift us up as we're able to lift up the weary hands of those that are on the front lines. Going to be some exciting news about some upcoming opportunities next month. So stay tuned. Probably just a few weeks and we'll have another update into July. So may the Lord continue to bless you, to make you a blessing, both to this ministry and to all those others that God has placed in your life, to just infatuate them with. May you be contagious with the love of Jesus, the joy of Jesus, the hope of Jesus Christ. Thank you for your prayers and your support. Stick with us. Link with or click on the links of the other resources. You're going to see some field reports. I did a series of short videos of interviews with Pastor JB, and I also did some shorts explaining some important aspects of our mission strategy over there in Nigeria. Please click on these links, get informed for your prayers. Thank you again. May the Lord richly bless you.